Good to see you, man. How you doing?
Really good, dude. It's always a pleasure to be just hanging out in these groups and feeling the feelings, and yeah, it's lovely. So yeah, thanks for having me, dude.
It's very cool to see you. And I loved reading what you wrote for a bunch of reasons, but I also loved how you finished it. You loves a real and authentic conversation about the formless dimension which animates us all. So what first sparked your interest in the formless dimension that animates us all?
Oh man, it's funny, right? Because I think I used to say the answer to that question was probably 16, 17 years of age, off the charts anxiety, already like really addicted to alcohol and smoking weed and all sorts of stuff going on for me. And then I read The Power of Now, and I had some really big insights. And, you know, I realized, oh shit, like I'm not a victim of my thoughts and feelings because they're not me, you know. But, you know, recently I've been kind of like working on a book and writing, and I've realized that really pretty young, I used to stare into the mirror and just sort of say to myself over and over again, like, who are you? Who are you? And I'd kind of trip myself out, and it'd be weird, and I'd have to walk away, and I'd lie in bed and I'd kind of imagine what it would be like to not exist, which obviously, you know, is a paradox, but it would take me to these weird states, and then life kicks in, right? So it kind of feels like it's always been there. It feels like it's, you know, it's in all of us, right? It's who we are. So it's, you can't shake it.
Well, it's funny you say that because my similar to you, I was using alcohol full on as my major way of adjusting to reality from when I was about 12, and I didn't have any conscious sense of a spiritual dimension to life till I was much older. But then when I started looking in this direction, it was a game changer. So what was your journey into kind of coaching with this understanding?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of bumbled around. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I sort of fell in, like, long story short, spent a lot of time traveling and had a lot of fun. And also, you know, just messed myself up a lot. But I kind of fell into teaching. I didn't know what else to do with myself. I was teaching abroad. I was teaching English as a foreign language. So I got really curious about language acquisition and people picking up stuff. And after a few years, I was promoted to, the assistant director of a school in Poland. And I wouldn't have said it was coaching, but where I came alive, what I absolutely loved, funnily enough, wasn't being in the classroom. It was all the ad hoc support for the new teachers.
Right.
Today. And I kind of realized, like, oh shit, do you know what? It's way better for someone to go and like have a car crash of a lesson or have an amazing lesson and then come back and tell you all the stuff they've learned over me trying to like spoon feed them prior. So I kind of guess it was then.
Nice.
And then a few years later, I couldn't tell you how, I did kind of like a formal life coaching certificate. And I was in a school, I was working in a school. I wanted to coach the teachers. They wouldn't let me. They'd only let me coach the students. I don't know why. So I jumped ship, you know, and the rest is history. I set up Sober Rebellion back then. So much has happened, man. It wasn't even that long ago, but it feels, you know, time's done weird stuff. But yeah, really the amount I've learned and how life looks to me now compared to 3 or 4 years ago it's like I've literally stepped into a new world, which is just amazing. That's
so cool to hear. And with Sober Rebellion, you've got a podcast, but you also have groups that you support in one-to-one coaching and group coaching and stuff. How are you bringing kind of this understanding into that work? And I guess I also want to know what kind of impact has this understanding had on the nature of the work you do?
Huge. And I think when I first started coaching people, particularly in the kind of addictions and habits space, I was giving them like the Swiss Army knife of tools and tactics and shit that cool shit they could do. I literally used to do this thing called the sobriety like toolkit. And we'd kind of pack our bags and like, it's not that stuff is completely useless, but it's fucking hard work, and you've got to remember to carry it. And sometimes life's hard and it just falls apart in front of you. And, you know, so I think the really profound thing that I've seen in that space, or one of the really profound things I've seen, is that what really makes a difference to people is insights into the nature of addiction, not the kind of content, the personal experience they're having. Because the moment they touch that space, they kind of walk into this orientation of realizing like, oh shit, like I'm actually already free, but I just had some stuff on top of it. And then it starts melting, and then people, because the goal's not to stop, like loads of people can stop drinking and still feel like they're in like a mental prison. Right? So it ain't that. Freedom ain't that. It's deeper than that. And I think that's the profound thing, is truly waking people up to this beautiful space they've got where they're already free, and trusting that to guide them back to where they already are.
Yeah, I like that. And I love that freedom is such a kind of core element of what you're pointing to, because I think ironically that's one of the things that people are searching for in addiction. They're looking to, drink or drugs or whatever to get liberated from one kind of psychological and emotional prison or another, and realizing that the keys to that door are somewhere else is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really curious. It seems that alcohol, drugs, chocolate cake, they can kind of bring pleasure. They can play around with our neurology, right? But once someone touches joy, true innate joy or peace or clarity, love, then that's a different ball game. Like it's a different thing altogether. And so suddenly life can just look entirely different. And that's how it looks to me. Like it literally just doesn't make sense to me that I would even consider alcohol as an option, because it doesn't make sense. It's like it's funny, right? Because it used to make so much sense.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't. So yeah. But no, it's true, man. It's really profound. And people can have really radical shifts really quickly. And I often say to people, it doesn't take time, it takes insights. And sometimes those insights take a bit longer for some people. So it's sometimes it's one moment, and then suddenly they're free.
Yeah, I think that's such a profound statement. It doesn't take time, it takes insights. You've heard me mention it, I'm sure, but an insight I had long before I knew what insight was. I was sitting in a 12-step meeting and thinking there's no way this bullshit could work for me. And then one day I'm sitting there and I'm like, maybe it could work anyway, even though I know I'm right, and even though I know everything, and even though I'm sure this isn't going to work and there's nothing to it, maybe it could work anyway. And the reason I love that insight is that without that, I probably wouldn't be here right now. Just that one glimpse, which now looks to me kind of like humility, which is not a quality that people often associate with me, but it does, it's like, oh, there's something bigger than you. There's something, there's a logic and a wisdom and an intelligence that somehow knows more than you. And I think for anyone watching or listening to this, I just would love people to know that that's true for all of us, that there's a wisdom and intelligence built into you that is capable of transforming your life and bringing you that freedom that you mentioned, Sam.
Yeah, man. There's a whole world of feeling and a whole world of knowing that's just opens up when we realize that just because you can say the word, just because you've kind of collected all the ideas in your head, and just you can try and convince yourself with that shit, but I think that humility is really powerful, because when we suddenly realize, like, oh, hang on a minute, what if there is something else to know? Then we drop into that deeper space, and things can really sort of move from here to here. And we see that to which the words are pointing rather than just repeating the words. And I mean, I was the freaking master of that shit. Like, I was a ninja. I was ninja level with that shit. But it wasn't. But I didn't feel completely free, right? Not until I let go of that.
Yeah, and what strikes me, Sally, because you're making a big difference to a lot of people with the work that you're doing, and I just think it's really important work. You're one of the people who's clarity coach, but doing the advanced program. What are some of the things that are just really hitting you in terms of kind of the nature of coaching with this understanding? How's your kind of philosophy, if you like, of coaching people from this understanding continuing to develop?
I'm so great. I was so hoping that you'd ask me that, because
I didn't know I was going to ask it until just now. So I'm glad that landed.
It's funny because the last week, it's like I've been smacked in the face with this realization of, so I'm sort of creating this new thing this year, rebel spirituality, right? And I've just realized that the thing that underpins all of it is that it looks like the intelligence behind life, consciousness, is pretty freaking rebellious. Like, it's doing some pretty cool shit. It's growing people and spinning planets around, and it's fucking amazing. And in life, I feel like we're either coming from spirit and we're free to just be and meet the moment pretty close to how it is, right? Or we're innocently coming from conditioning or rules. And wisdom doesn't follow rules, right? That's the strap for my thing, because it doesn't give a shit what you think. And we innocently lock that in by having ideas and rules and just programming we've picked up that worked for us once. But the moment we let it go, it has all these new channels to flow through, and suddenly we can. You don't need to upgrade a belief, as it looks to me. You don't need any. you can float on the intelligence of life, and I think that's the philosophy that I have. Is that I just want. If someone could just wake up to the truth of what that spirit, what that energy can do, and it just moved the needle by just a 2 degrees in their life, I know the impact that has. So I trust that. I just trust that looking that way for me is going to wake up that truth in them. I don't need convincing that that's true.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, man, because I used to work so hard. Like, at all the stuff, I was so knackered at the end of coaching sessions and stuff. And these days, I freaking love it. It's amazing.
Funnily enough, you'll never believe, when I used to be an NLP trainer, right? And I loved teaching NLP, really loved doing it. But by the time I would get to 3 days in on a 3-day module or something, I was so fucked.
Yeah.
And my mood would drop somewhere on day 3, and I'd be kind of like, why am I doing this? I'm such a terrible trainer. I'd be like, I better start smoking and drinking and then kill myself. And it looked real, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't realize back then how much thinking I was having to do just to navigate the weekend. And so now I do something like this weekend, for instance, or last weekend. I was teaching for 3 days last weekend, and I want to have a day off afterwards and that sort of thing, which is fine. But I'm energized by it. It's energizing because it's almost like the wisdom and intelligence of life is kind of getting to have its way with us or something. And there's something nourishing about it. And Leslie picked up on the same thing I did, which is wisdom doesn't follow rules. I love the way you said that and the way you see that. Can you say some more about that, Sam?
Yeah, man, it was so clear to me. So at the moment I saw that I wanted to work in this rebel spirituality space, I knew, it's wisdom. It just came to me, like, wisdom without rules, or wisdom doesn't follow rules, because I've realized that, I guess rules is just a metaphor for any structure that is, That's an awesome question, man. Your structures are beautiful. We're always going to have them. It's your personalities are useful, right? As you often
Yeah.
names are great. Like when you're in the shops and you get lost, your girlfriend can shout at you and stuff. Like all that stuff's super helpful. But sometimes there are just some programs or some ways of thinking that they're just like a little bit of an energetic block.
Mm.
And funnily enough, it's kind of weird because I guess the block can keep wisdom down a bit. It's always there, but the thing that's going to melt the block is actually that insight, that wisdom itself. So I'm fascinated by that. It kind of seems, that I've talked to you about this kind of like beautiful kind of almost paradoxical thing that happens where what makes sense to us does change.
Mm.
It does melt. It does look different. And I guess it's trust for me as well. Like in this moment sat with you, it looks like I can trust something far greater than Sam. And that's awesome news because there's loads of stuff Sam's pretty shit at. And so when I get to trust that other space, like life or, however you want to call it, like that's just such a more peaceful space to be. And it's pretty wild too. Like it's pretty cool. Sometimes you'll be like, I really think I should do this. The job's pretty good. I've got a pension. And it's like, not enough. Go here, you're like, this is pretty cool. Got this coaching business. I'm making loads of difference. It's like, that way. You're like,
yeah.
But
I can relate. I can so relate because that's what happened to me when I first stumbled across these principles. I was like, oh, there's principles. Okay, we're going that way. But then it's also happened to me over the last year. I had business running well a certain way. It's like, no, I need to simplify now. And I realized that the new edition of the book is like a new seed and I need to clear space for wherever that's going to take me. So you've reminded me of a quote I think it's by Camus, who said, integrity has no need of rules.
Yes.
And the thing that hit me with that is, if you know how some element of life works, then the principles, you can rely on the principles. You don't need a rule of thumb or a map or whatever. And we will make maps. But the thing about maps is they're always about the way things were rather than the way things are now. So when I hear you say wisdom doesn't follow rules, there's something that's vividly alive and present moment about that for me.
Yeah, that's it, man. And that's what it feels like. It's when we're coming from our rebel spirit, there are no rules. Like you're just doing what makes sense to you in the moment, trusting life, which is where response comes from over reaction. It's where love comes from over dismissal. It's where all the magic comes from, as it looks to me. And it's such a beautiful way, I think, to orient, because I can ask myself, like, am I coming from spirit right now? And sometimes I'll lose that, right? I won't see it. But and it looks that simple. Like I like that. That's what I love so much about this understanding and having worked with you, man. And I really freaking love you, dude, because the stuff you've opened up in the spaces that I've been with you has just simplified my life to a degree I didn't know was possible. And that word is so powerful, because I was talking to Chip this week and he said to me, Sid once said to him, standing in simplicity, you can see all of the complexity, but standing in complexity, you can never see simplicity.
Yeah.
I was so struck by that, man. And my life seems so much more simple, so much more full of love, so much more full of joy. And I'm so much close. I just know that even when I'm caught up, I'm that close. I'm that close to being home again. Like it's just it's completely different to how my life ran for, years and years and years and years and years and years. And yeah, I'm profoundly grateful that
all
the places, this is where we find ourselves. It's pretty cool.
I love hearing that, Sam, and I love you and I love working with you. And the thing that hit me as I was listening to you, the thing, and I bet you'll relate to this actually, is the thing that's when people are talking about my approach to coaching or comparing it to their own approach and that sort of thing, it's like, I'm doing so much less than they are. It's like I'm paying attention to so much less than they are. Like there's so much less that I'm needing to respond to, because once you understand the principles of it, it's so simple. It's so simple. Not always easy. Like there's it's the cool thing is, on the one hand, it's simple, but it's also like when I'm doing it well, I'm like at the top of my game. But it's like it simplifies it so you can. It's funny. I was coaching someone in one of our group calls a few weeks ago, and he was saying that something was going on for him, something, unpleasant and that sort of thing. And I go to him, I go, it sounds as though you think that could damage you. And it didn't land. It didn't land. But I could feel that like there was something he needed to hear. So I just repeated it and it still didn't land. But I'm like, but I could feel it. I could feel his heart. And I'm like, so I tried it one more time and it landed and the whole thing cracked open. And it's so, there's a simplicity there that I think increases your impact like astronomically. But what are you seeing in the kind of difference and impact you're making with your clients these days, Sam?
I guess that there's just such a wonderful feeling, man. It just looks like that to me. That I spend a lot of time, so I coach with some kind of groups in and around alcohol, and I spend time working with people who are kind of like in post-addiction growth, and I work with a lot of people who then they're like, oh, hang on a minute, Sam, there's more. Like, we're like, what? Let's go. And it just looks like across the board, there's no real difference, right? I used to have kind of buckets for stuff. And I had this insight. I remember sharing it with you a few weeks ago. Oh, like it's all one thing. Like I was stressing myself out because I was like, oh God, there's this bit and there's this bit and there's all these things. And then I realized, oh no, it's like, it's all one thing. It's okay. It's all feeding into each other. So there's just a feeling across everything I do. And I don't know, like it's beautiful. The things that people say are very different to what they used to say, man.
Oh, really? What are you hearing that's different?
I think people used to say really nice stuff, and we used to have great kind of intellectual conversations about alcohol and addiction and great toolkits, that kind of stuff. But these days, there's so much feeling in what people say. Like they thank me for being present and being open and being vulnerable and being authentic and having the courage to say the things that I say. There was a time where that stuff was really, really hard, and now I just see that just like being vulnerable, it just such a gift, because there's vulnerability and strength. Without it, the storm will come that's gonna break the strongest tree, right? But if we've got some flex in us, if we've got some vulnerability, if we're sharing and if we're open, then we're just far stronger for that. And I think people are just, I don't think they're kind of picking up on Sam as much anymore. They're kind of picking up on who they really are, right?
That's a really cool way of putting it.